For us to be great leaders, we need to continually move away from controlling to empowering. Empowering leaders encourage growth, but empowering others is hard work. It takes effort and commitment, but it's so worth it. It's also a biblical, Jesus-following approach that we're all called to, and we need to get this right. What would our band, our worship team, our church, our city look like if we all grew in our ability to be empowering leaders? Great, so we've looked at defining controlling versus empowering leadership, hopefully some things for you to think about. We're now going to look at some of the reasons why we may default to controlling behavior. And we all do it. If we're all honest, we've got aspects of our leadership that we default to control. But why is that? And what can we do about it? The very first one I want to share is that the reason we default to controlling is that we have this idea that I can do it better. One of the biggest mistakes we can think is to align ourselves with a statement that for something to be done right, I have got to do it myself. And why is this important? Why is it important that we deal with this mistaken understanding? Because when we consider that we are always necessary and the one that is always right, we will become the lid, the ceiling for our teams. When we control, we simply build dependence on ourselves, and everything comes back to us. It leads to burnout and frustration and limits ourselves. So what's it all about? It's about spending versus investing. A controlling leader, they'll think that if they don't do it, it's not going to be done right. And the reality is it's probably true for the very first time of doing it. The reality is if you're doing things once, you'll probably end up doing it than other people. But an empowering leader understands that while it may not be done well the first time, eventually the right person can do it as well, but most probably even better than we can. And that's such an incredibly hopeful thing to think about. And it excites me a lot to think that other people will go way beyond my limitations and my giftings. An example for me would be in songwriting. I realize that I'm not going to be able to write, award-winning songs or songs necessarily that will be sung around the world. But I can invest my time in empowering others and encouraging others to write songs that they might go way beyond my capacity and ability. So my time is well spent on empowering others and encouraging others, as well as pursuing things individually as well. How can we invest in others to empower them to go further than ourselves? Another reason why we might be thinking that I can do it better than other people is that we overestimate our own importance. And that's going to be true for many of us. We'll have a blind spot, we'll overestimate our own importance. But what's the problem with that? What's the issue? Is when we overestimate our own importance, we're unintentionally undervaluing others around us. And when we unintentionally or inadvertently undervalue our team around us, there's two things that will happen. First of all, is they will not grow. When we undervalue others, they will not grow. And the more extreme outcome of undervaluing others is that they won't stay, they won't stick around. I don't know about you, but would you be happy in a team where you feel undervalued? And maybe you feel undervalued in this team, and if that's the case, let's have a conversation about it and see if we can change that. But people won't stick around if they're undervalued, and we want to be good stewards of people that have come to us, that we shepherd them well, we lead them well, we disciple them well. And so we've got to make sure we're not overestimating our own importance and underestimating other people. And so what are some of the reasons why we might overestimate our own importance? Well, first of all, it could be rooted in pride. We think we know more than others, our opinion counts more than other people, and we're not interested in what other people say. The other reason why we might overestimate our own importance is that we don't recognize that everyone has something to contribute, whether it's large or small. And we actually need to remain curious and be willing to collaborate with other people, to be team players. So what are some of the other reasons why we might say that I can do it than other people, better than other people? Is that we may not trust the team to do it right. We might not trust others. And the first thing we need to do to address that is just simply change our mind, to recognize that it's a lie, that the team can do it right, given enough care and attention, coaching, adjustment, discipling, empowering. They can do it right eventually. But one of the ways we can build trust is to build relationships with one another. We need to move past our assumptions of one another. We need to really listen to one another. We need to give opportunities to discover people's strengths and weaknesses. When we understand people's true limits, true capacities, true capabilities, then we're able to trust them appropriately. We're not asking people to do blind trust. We need to build trust. So how do we build trust? The answer is very simple. The only way to know if we can trust someone is to trust them. And of course that can be messy because at times we'll be disappointed. Sometimes people will let us down. And so it's not about blindly trusting people with anything, but appropriately giving opportunities for people to test their limits, to understand what they're capable of. And we need to reevaluate that regularly. We need to err on the side of trusting people until they reach their limits. And only then will we know people's capacities and capabilities. We need to be willing to count the cost, even if it's painful or we look silly. When we trust people, there is a risk of people not meeting our expectations or making a mistake. And sometimes they look silly, but often as a leader, we're the ones that have egg on our face. And we need to deal with that in terms of our own pride and what other people think about our own identity. I mean, an example of this would be where I've tried to, as a principal, involve young people in worship, knowing that it's a risk. They won't always do things right. They won't always do things to the standard of other people, but it's an opportunity for them to learn and grow. And it's obviously about giving people appropriate platforms and experiences. But we need to be specific and intentional about who and what we entrust to people. An example is, I wouldn't trust Lucas, my 3-year-old, to drive a car. I'm not going to say, hey, I trust you, Lucas, and therefore let's get you in a car and driving. It wouldn't be fair on him or me or the car. It's not going to end well. But I would entrust Lucas to hang out some washing, something that he's interested in, something that's low risk, something that is within his capabilities. And so when it comes to trusting others, we need to make sure that we have an approach that is suitable and is specific to the person. And one great place to start, if you're struggling to trust others, is simply to ask for their opinion. You're not asking them to do something specific, you're not asking them to take responsibilities, you're just asking for their opinion and inviting them to participate in the conversation. So that's the first reason why we might default to controlling behavior, is that we think that we can do it better than other people. The second thing that might lead us to defaulting to controlling behavior is that we are overemphasizing the immediate outcome over the long-term vision. Overemphasizing short-term outcomes rather than long-term vision. So an example for us would be that we focus so much on a Sunday set list that we don't provide opportunities for long-term growth of our team members. Something to consider is that the strength of your band is not a reflection of what you can control. The strength of your band is a reflection of who you empower and who you multiply. Another way of saying it is that the fruit or the strength of your band is not how good your set is going to be on this coming Sunday, but the strength or the fruit of your band is by how much your band has grown over this next season. That's what we're interested in. We're interested in growing the team, encouraging growth, not just accomplishing a short-term task. So what are some of the reasons why we might be overemphasizing the short-term outcome over the long-term vision? The first one is that we simply lack love for our teams. We see them as tools rather than people. And we really need to come before God and ask Him to show us how He sees them, that these are living stones, valuable individuals, people deeply loved by Him, and that we have a responsibility to care and nurture people as we empower them and not control them. A second reason why we might overemphasize the short-term outcome over the long-term vision is that we've not fully grasped our values. We don't understand, accept, adopt, or align ourselves with our value of encouraging growth. And it's important for alignment as a leadership team is that we're all pulling in the same direction. If we're not aligned on our values, if we don't agree with them, then we're not going to be pulling in line. We're always going to be in conflict, always going to be struggling with one another. And that means it's not just something that we say we agree, it's not just lip service, is that it's a value we hold in our heart. And that's only possible and is only real when it outworks in our behavior and our actions. So if you're struggling to align with the value of encouraging growth, is take it to God, allow God to change our hearts and settle whether the value of encouraging growth is really important for us as a team. And if you find that encouraging growth actually you don't think is a value for the team, then let's discuss it as a leadership team. Maybe we need to tweak or change our values from time to time. And we need to make sure that we're aligned on our values, whatever they are. The last reason why we might overemphasize short-term outcomes for long-term vision is that we've misaligned our expectations as a team. This might be a phrase that we might think. If I don't control it, it won't be good enough. And of course the question is, well, what is good enough? And maybe, and even more important, is good enough for who? Who are we trying to perform for, please, serve? Who sets the expectations? And we have two quality baselines, two underlying principles that underpin all of our values. And so we can become unstuck when we allow our values of exalting God, creating encounters, engaging guests to exist without some kind of bounded by quality baselines. And those two quality baselines are distraction-free and people giving their sustainable best. Distraction-free and sustainable best. And if we can all operate with those boundaries of distraction-free and sustainable best, we'll be really well placed to hold a long-term vision for empowering growth in others. Distraction-free means that we don't allow people to serve in a way that creates distraction, where they're unprepared or unqualified or inexperienced to a point, or undisciplined enough that they cause a distraction. That sets our lower boundary, but allows for people to grow. And the next one is that people give their sustainable best. We want people to really value part of the team, but we're not going to abuse or drive people to meet our expectations of things when it's at the detriment of their relationship with God, relationship with their families, and their general health and well-being. So we need to understand each person's individual sustainable best and encourage people to continue growing itself. So that's the first part of some reasons why we might default to controlling behavior. The idea that, or the misunderstanding that I can do it better than others, and this idea of overemphasizing short-term outcomes for long-term vision. We're going to carry on the conversation in the next video.